oftentimes when I think about mental health, I think about our relationship to our nervous system. And I think about what happens like when we're in a nice kind of regulated state, like we're in that nice, calm social engagement network. So like I'm talking to you and if I feel relaxed, like the conversation just flows, there's a sense of safety. And then I think about, what happens when we don't have that kind of sense of regulation or that sense of safety. And so if you've heard of like the fight or flight mechanism in our body, which, is very helpful evolutionarily, lets us know when there's danger present, and really helps us protect ourselves. But sometimes that can be kind of keyed up, especially if we've had traumatic situations in our lives, or even just like from toxic stress, right? So there's something called a window of tolerance, right? And when we're inside of that window of tolerance, we're usually pretty regulated. We're in that social engagement network. And then when we become triggered, whether we go above that window of tolerance into like hyper arousal, so like I'm anxious, like before we started this podcast, right? Or my body kind of shuts down. My nervous system kind of shuts down. I go below that window of tolerance into more of a dissociative kind of cutoff space. So what we're trying to do a lot, I think, within mental health is really help people find flexibility in their nervous system so they can find their way back inside that window and maybe even expand that window, so that, if they are triggered, they can more easily come back to a place where they feel regulated again. So really that's just one lens on it, but that's one of the things that I think about. Yeah.
Great. Before we continue, I just want to put a disclaimer for our listeners out there. If you know you yourself or somebody who needs mental health right away, contact the right organizations nearby you. So don't let this video be the only stop for this, right?
I really appreciate that. Yes. If you need help, there are so many services out there, and we'll talk about that more later. But yeah, definitely seek professional help. So
what about like mental health as far as its history? Like how did it come about? Is it like a relatively recent practice as compared to as physical health, for example,
Yeah, I think the recognition of it is definitely more recent than the medical field, which is why I think it's still coming into a place where we're really understanding the impact of our mental health on our physical health, right? Like those things, I don't think you can separate those things. But I think historically we've placed more of a priority on the physical body, right? Not recognizing the ways in which, we hold stress or, our relationship to our nervous system really affects our relationship to the world, I think. And so I'm not like a 100%, a historian, but I can say that my education, began around like psychoanalysis and Sigmund Freud, who everybody probably hears about a lot when I think of psychology. You sit on the couch and you're just free associating and you're telling somebody everything that comes out of your mind and they're analyzing you, which is, not so much how it is now. I think we've learned kind of a lot of Freud's approaches were not necessarily the only way to approach, and not everything was actually helpful about the way that he approached working with mental health. But one of the important things I think that came out of that was really the impact of our early childhood experiences on our lives later and how that never really leaves us, right? So those early relationships that we have really kind of form the template of how we relate to people way down the line. If you've ever heard of like attachment, right? So that initial relationship that we have with whoever our caregivers are really does then influence the way that we relate to people later on in life. So